We now cross live to Abuja for Dr. Kayode Fayemi's Commemorative Symposium and the launch of the Amanda Policy and Leadership Institute. Stay with us. This is still the Arise News channel.
A reader, a banker, a politician of note, a man who understands the Amanda Institute. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a man who understands succession, leadership, loyalty, and service. A man who visited his former tailor when he was in the university and changed his life and made a couple of more clothes. Who does that except a man of service? Help me welcome our chief host, a legacy bearer, His Excellency Governor Oyebanji, former governor of current governor of Ekiti State. We can't confuse you with the celebrant. The current governor of Ekiti State is making his way. In addition to being a governor, he's also a brother and a friend. Governor of Ekiti State, another round of applause for him, please.
Your Excellency, the Vice President, let me use you to extend courtesies to all distinguished Nigerians that are here this morning because of time. I have 5 minutes. I adopt the protocol as established, and on behalf of the government and people of Ekiti State, I once again welcome all of us to this occasion. As a government, we are glad for the life of Governor Kayode Fayemi. It has been 60 years of positive impact to humanity, globally, nationally, and at the subnational level. Sir, on behalf of your people from Ekiti, we are immensely grateful to you for your service to Ekiti people. History will surely be kind to you. You build on the achievements of your predecessors as led by Governor Niyi Adebayo, Governor Segun Onirusia. Governor Fayose sent his apology. He's out of the country, he's coming in today. He sent his apologies. Through your policies, programs, and action, you laid an enduring legacy in Ekiti State on which I'm building on. Your people from Ekiti are immensely proud of your achievement in the last 60 years. We are proud of you, we love you, we wish you the best, and we are sure that the best is yet to come. Sir, on behalf of your mentees, some of them are here, some have joined us virtually. I'm one of them. I say thank you for your mentorship, for providing the wings for us to fly. And on behalf of myself, I say thank you. You are a benefactor, you are standing by me, and you are being a good leader, a good mentor, a good brother, and a good friend. 60 looks good on you, but my desire on your 63rd birthday is that now that you have joined the Elders Forum, I think you need to slow down a bit and spend more time with Erelu and stay at home. Once again, sir, happy birthday.
Your Excellencies, Governor Oyebanji of Ekiti State, who is our chief host today, has rolled out the many mentoring qualities of His Excellency Dr. Fayemi. As we continue in the lineup of events and activities that we have lined up for today's really important, groundbreaking historical event, permit me to welcome a very distinguished personality in our midst who continues to raise the bar at what it means to serve. Not only did she serve Nigeria as a former Minister of Environment, she has served Nigeria in many capacities before then. She is a foremost ambassador of Nigeria. She carries her very high. Your Excellencies, the moment she receives the appointment to go into international space, we had a conversation about her attire and what it means to be a Nigerian in the public international space. She carries it with such aplomb, with such dignity, and does us so very proud every time she turns out when you see her in the international space. International civil servant of repute, a girl-child advocate, a woman of many parts preaching peace across the world. Help me welcome the lovely and elegant United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed.
Just before I start with the Excellencies, I just wanted to claim something for the women of Nigeria. First is that we are the #2 civil servant of the world. And second, we are GCON. These women. Just a reminder that we can also get to those heights as our men do. Your Excellency, Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by Your Excellency, Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON, Your Excellency, the Governor of Ekiti State, Your Excellency, former President General Yakubu Gowon, GCFR, our father, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, GCON, honorable ministers and governors, and let me just say former because I have never seen so many of my former colleagues in one room for a very long time, and it is an honor. And the present ministers and governors, royal fathers that are ably representing our royal mothers. Excellencies, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just trying to put women on the stand just as we have, It is a pleasure to join you all today as we celebrate the life of a remarkable contributions of my dear brother, Dr. Kayode Fayemi. Extraordinary leader, brilliant scholar, and a devoted husband and father. Welcome to the 6th floor. This milestone is not just a celebration of your life, but also of your enduring legacy in public service, in scholarship and leadership. As Governor of Ekiti State, your visionary reforms in governance, agriculture, and infrastructure laid the foundation for sustainable development. And your tenure as the Minister of Mines and Steel Development is a testament of transformational change with your efforts to reposition Nigeria's mining sector, playing a crucial role not only in diversifying our economy, but also in creating jobs. My dear brother, I'm particularly pleased to congratulate you on the launch of the Mandela Policy and Institute. Our world today is at a critical juncture, and it's marked by complex challenges and conflicts. In Africa and the region, we are grappling with political instability, weakened democratic institutions, and growing divisions between and within regions. These challenges not only undermine the progress on sustainable development, peace, and economic growth, but they're also reversing the hard-won gains in these areas. In these challenging times, the values of Pan-Africanism, unity, cooperation, and shared progress are more important than ever. Pan-Africanism reminds us that our future is interconnected, and by working together across borders, we can create a prosperous and peaceful Africa. The opportunity today that we have of Africa is not just us rising, but it is also to bring the world back from the brink. Today, we are living in surreal times where the rule of law is AWOL, where leadership is questioned, and where trust is broken and our social fabric is tearing. And that they have a Nigerian at the helm of affairs who is trying to fill these gaps and address leadership is just amazing, and it is where Nigeria should be, leadership in Africa and the world. By fostering regional collaboration and harnessing that leadership and policy for transformational change, The Institute is poised to drive the much-needed dialogues and actions that can propel Africa towards sustained transformation. And let me just underscore the importance of dialogues, because unless we are listening to one another, we are expressing our views free from fear, free from, I would say, judgment. Unless we do that, we will not get the richness of that diversity. We will not get the leadership that we need that represents each and every one of us. We must all be represented, and we can all agree to disagree, and we don't have to like each other, but we do have to get behind the leadership that this nation of over 240 million people so desperately needs. With its commitment to addressing leadership policy interface in Africa, the Institute is set to be a key player in shaping the future of African governance, ensuring that the next generation of leaders are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and visions to meet the challenges ahead and to reclaim Africa's place in the world. And I think to be reminded today, as I look at the many people in this room, my father's, but also our generation, I think His Excellency, the Governor of Ekiti, said, Kayode, welcome to the Elders Group. I think we're the last generation that knows what good is and has benefited from Nigeria. We owe, it's not entitlement, we owe the next generations a return on that investment that was made in us. I'd like to commend you and Erulu on this laudable initiative. As you have wisely said, the litmus test for our success is as leaders, not how many people we lead, but how many are transformed into leaders. But may I add to that, how we inspire followers. Because today you can be leading very well, you look behind you and there is no one. So we really need to also inspire our followers who have lost trust along the way. Excellencies, friends, as we celebrate Dr. Kayode today, I would like to honor his family, but especially my sister, Erulu. Your unwavering support has been instrumental to his success, and I think he would be the first to acknowledge that. You're a passionate advocate for women and children's rights and social justice, and you've stood alongside him, and together you've set and you continue to set an example of how collaboration, dedication can drive meaningful change. So I look forward to being like you when I grow up. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, expectations are really high of every forum that comes together to discuss this nation and the future of Africa. And the gaps are enormous. They will not be filled in our generation, but perhaps we can begin to lay those foundations for the next generation. Our young people are restless for change, and they demand it. So let's get to work and talk. Thank you.
Please, can we put our hands together one more time? The second highest civil servant in the world, and she says, it's not for me, it's for the women. I'd like to welcome here His Excellency the Governor of Ekiti State. Didn't come alone. He's here with virtually all members of the State Executive Council. The Speaker and members of the House of Assembly are also here. And let me also welcome the former Governor of Edo State, His Excellency John Odige Oyegun. I welcome you, Your Excellency. And so, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of the founding fathers of Pan-Africanism, and a whole lot of the people in the audience are scholars, and they will know that Martin Delany, W.E.B. Du Bois, Henry Sylvester Williams, Kwame Nkrumah, the great Zeke of Africa, and the man that will be speaking to us next, alongside the same pantheon as the celebrant, are founding fathers who are pushing the frontiers of Pan-Africanism. I remember in 1996, when this man that's going to speak to us gave an address, a speech, at the African National Congress, Cape Town. The thing that has become his mantra was established when he says, I am an African. But when I hear that, my tongue does not rest. The grace in my tongue tells me that I can also wax lyrical by being an African. I am an African not because my heart beats with Africa. I am an African, not because my skin is black, but because my mind is engaged by Africa. I am an African, not because my soul is at home on this beautiful continent. When Africa weeps for her children, my cheeks are stained with tears. And when Africa honors her elders, my head bows in respect. That describes this man that we're bringing now, the second president of independent South Africa. He'll be speaking to us because he's not here physically. He'll be speaking to us electronically. Please join us. I welcome here His Excellency Thabo Mbeki to deliver the keynote address.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veld. The dramatic shapes of the dragon's back, the soil-colored waters of the Likwa, Iqeli, Notugel, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito. A human presence among all of these, a feature on the face of our native land just defined, I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that in Kukuni land. Patriots at Tetwayo and Mpepu took to battle. The soldiers Mushweshwe and Ngumunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds and gold and the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African. Program Director, our dear friend and founder of the Amandla Institute, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, His Excellency President John Mahama, President of the Historic Republic of Ghana, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests and participants, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to apologize most sincerely for my failure to be with you today as you launch the Amandla Institute. The reason for this is that this launch coincides exactly with the delivery by our President Cyril Ramaphosa today in Parliament of what in our country we call the State of the Nation Address, the SONA. It is understood and expected that as a former head of state, I must attend this important occasion when the current head of state addresses the nation on the government's perspectives for the current year 2025. You will understand that I have to honor this expectation. However, I said all of this with great regret.
That regret derives from the fact that indeed I would have been very greatly honored and privileged to attend the launch of the Amandla Institute. I therefore take this opportunity to congratulate our friend and fellow combatant for Africa's Renaissance, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, and for the launch of this institute. I'm very glad indeed that so many of our esteemed fellow Africans set aside time to participate at this launch. The launch takes place under the relevant but challenging theme, renewing the Pan-African ideal for changing times, and this signals the importance we must attach to the formation of the Institute. The rest of the theme of this launch demands that correct answers to the strategic matters pertaining to the leadership and policy challenge and opportunities confronting our continent. Like all of us present at this launch of the Institute, I'm greatly inspired that our friend Kayode Fayemi took the initiative to establish the Institute. This is because I'm certain that thereby our continent has acquired a vitally important think tank which will add immensely to Africa's capacity to find the right answers to the many challenges she faces. Program Director, immediately the theme renewing the Pan-African ideal for changing times suggests two things. One of these is that somehow the Pan-African ideal has receded in terms of contemporary African political practice. The second is that we must understand that the global setting in which our continent exists and must pursue its Pan-African goals is changing to a strategically important degree. Responding to this correct thesis, I'd like to start by saying something about some of the objectives our continent has set itself. In May 2013, to mark the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the OAU, the 21st Ordinary Session of the AU Assembly of Heads of State and Government adopted the 50th Anniversary Solemn Declaration. Among other things, that declaration says, "We African Heads of State and Government, guided by the vision of our union and affirming our determination to build an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven and managed by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena, declare our strong commitment to accelerate the African Renaissance by ensuring the integration of the principles of Pan-Africanism in all our policies and initiatives, and will move with speed towards the integration and merger of the regional economic communities as the building blocks of the Union. We will endeavor for Africa to take its rightful place in the political, security, economic, and social systems of global governance towards the realization of its renaissance and establishing Africa as a leading continent. And thus we reiterate our commitment to Africa's active role in the globalization process and international forums, including in the financial and economic institutions. We pledge to act together with our peoples and the African diaspora to realize our vision of Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance. The last OAU Assembly of Heads of State and Government held in Lusaka, in Zambia in 2001, adopted what ultimately became known as the New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. In October of that year, the NEPAD leadership issued a comprehensive document on NEPAD, and among others, the document says that this new partnership for Africa's development is a pledge by African leaders based on a common vision and a firm and shared conviction that they have a pressing duty to eradicate poverty and to place their countries, both individually and collectively, on a path of sustainable growth and development, and at the same time to participate actively in the world economy and body politic. It says the poverty and backwardness of Africa stand in stark contrast to the prosperity of the developed world. And the new Partnership for Africa's Development calls for the reversal of this abnormal situation by changing the relationship that underpins it. Africans are appealing neither for the further entrenchment of dependency through aid nor for marginal concessions. We are convinced that an historic opportunity presents itself to end the scourge of underdevelopment that afflicts Africa. The resources, including the capital, technology, and human skills that are required to launch a global war on poverty and underdevelopment exist in abundance and are within our reach. Across the continent, Africa has declared that we will no longer allow ourselves to be conditioned by circumstance. We will determine our own destiny and call on the rest of the world to complement our efforts, unquote. I've quoted passages from the AU 2013 Solemn Declaration and the 2001 NEPAD founding document, because these state precisely what our continent wants to achieve, in all instances informed by the Pan-African ideal to which this launch of the Amandla Institute has drawn our attention. Accordingly, no one among us or elsewhere on our continent and the African diaspora can say that as a continent we have not identified the objectives we pursue and therefore that we have not defined the Africa we want. Through both the OAU and the AU, we have indeed defined the Africa we want, including through Agenda 2063. Necessarily, the next important question arising from this is what have we done to build the Africa we want? Before we address this important question, let me say something about the global setting within which Africa pursues its objectives. The defeat of Nazism in 1945, the subsequent emergence of the new socialist countries, and the virtual total defeat and destruction of the global system of colonialism created excellent conditions for the realization of the African aspirations. Among others, all this turned the United Nations and especially its General Assembly into a true friend of the peoples of Africa. For instance, when the General Assembly adopted its Millennium Declaration, it devoted a few paragraphs specifically to Africa. In a section headed Meeting the Special Needs of Africa, it said, among others, we will support the consolidation of democracy in Africa and assist Africans in their struggle for lasting peace, poverty eradication, and sustainable development, thereby bringing Africa into the mainstream of the world economy. In September 2002, the General Assembly adopted the United Nations Declaration on the New Partnership for Development, which said, quote, we recommit ourselves to meeting the special needs of Africa as recognized in the Millennium Declaration and other agreements. We welcome the New Partnership for Africa's Development as an African-led, owned, and managed initiative, and recognize that it is a serious commitment to addressing the aspirations of the continent. In 2008, the General Assembly adopted the Political Declaration on Africa's Development Needs and said, and I quote, we recommit ourselves to reinvigorate and strengthen a global partnership of equals based on our common values, mutual accountability, shared responsibility, and the determination to collectively act for our common future and to mobilize the resources, including human, financial, technological, required to end poverty, hunger, and underdevelopment in Africa, with the explicit objective of turning existing commitments into concrete actions, unquote. For its part, in 2002, the G8, the then leading group of industrialized countries, adopted the G8 Africa Action Plan, which said, inter alia, I quote, we, the heads of state and government of 8 major industrialized democracies and the representatives of the European Union, meeting with African leaders at Kananaskis, welcome the initiative taken by African states in adopting the New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, a bold and clear-sighted vision of Africa's development. We will pursue this action plan in our individual and collective capacities and through the international institutions to which we belong. And we will take the necessary steps to ensure the effective implementation of our action plan, and will review progress in our next summit based on a final report from our personal representatives for Africa, unquote. Surely, given such commitments by all nations through the UN General Assembly, as well as the dominant global economic players, Africa's dreams would be realized. In this regard, in this 2001 document we've cited, NEPAD had this to say, and I quote, "In Africa, 340 million people, or half the population, live on less than $1 US dollar per day. The mortality rate of children under 5 years of age is 140 per 1,000. And life expectancy at birth is only 54 years. Only 58% of the population have access to safe water. The rate of illiteracy for people over 15 is 41%. There are only 18 mainline telephones per 1,000 people in Africa, compared to 146 for the world as a whole, and 567 for the high-income countries," unquote. In its Economic Development in Africa report 20 years later, in 2021, UNCTAD reported that in Africa, 34% of households are below the international poverty line. And with a regional Gini coefficient of around 0.40, they form part of some of the most unequal societies in the world. And with regard to trade, the share of Africa in world trade has declined steadily over the past 50 years. And it continues that the period of growth in the 2000s has not translated into significantly improved livelihoods for most people in Africa, as the income gap between rich and poor has widened. For its part, the World Bank reported that about 464 million people in Africa are still living in extreme poverty in 2024. The region continues to grapple with high debt risks, with 53% of IDAT eligible countries trade-offs. It is curtailing the fiscal space to invest in development priorities such as human capital, energy, transportation, and it is raising their vulnerability to shocks, particularly for countries with access to global capital markets and other concessional financing sources. As a result, the risk of external debt distress in sub-Saharan Africa remains high, unquote. The region's growth performance, they said, inadequate to reduce extreme poverty and boost prosperity. In a 2020 article entitled "The UN at 75 Years, Africa and the Strained Relationship," Professor Mark Kogan writes inter alia that, quote, "Since the start, UN peacekeeping in Africa has been a miserable failure," and mentions the 1994 Rwanda genocide specifically. And he says United Nations admits that the goal of poverty eradication is not close to being met. And projections suggest that over 23% of sub-Saharan Africa's projected 2030 population of 1.7 billion will be living in extreme poverty. In other words, of the 500 million people that will be living in extreme poverty by 2030, 479 million will be from sub-Saharan Africa, unquote. The new Sustainable Development Goals, which contain 17 goals with 169 targets and 232 specific indicators, also put Africa on the back foot. Says the professor, related to development finance, already 20% of all African countries do not raise enough in revenues for essential state functions, while in sub-Saharan Africa that rate rises to 33%. The 2024 Africa Sustainable Development Report, issued by the UN Economic Commission for Africa and others, makes this disturbing but predictable finding. For Africa, less than 6% of the 32 measurable SDG targets are on track to be achieved by 2030. Obviously, there are more of such statistics about the challenges Africa faces that we can cite. However, I believe that this is not necessary. To close this part of my comments, I would like to quote a very interesting observation which was made in January 2023 by Max Eil, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Ghent. He made this observation in an article written in the light of the proposal made by the then chair of the G77 plus China, Miguel Diaz-Canel, President of the Republic of Cuba, for the resuscitation of the project for the new international economic order. The Max Eil article is entitled "The NIEO, the New International Economic Order in a State of Permanent Insurrection," and says, quote, "In the 1970s, the countries of the South mounted a collective assault on the world economic order. They proposed instead a new international economic order to challenge the neocolonial system. Such a project painted the future sky with dazzling plans for prosperity. A bright variety of socialist and radical nationalist projects to change the world. The strengths of these projects were numerous, but however, the Western states were eager to draw the South into fruitless convenings shorn of serious commitments. If the front was not radical enough to win, it was too radical for the imperialist powers. If national capitalisms in the periphery were not possible because of the nature of accumulation on a world scale, which demanded subordination, labor reserves, and value transfer, and relied on peripheral disarticulation for markets and commodities, it was far too radical from the perspective of Northern monopoly capital. Why, after all, would Northern monopoly capital accept changing terms of trade which were to its advantage? Why would it allow for draining labor reservoirs which depressed peripheral trade wages and were central to the systemic stability of capitalism? Why would it allow peripheral industrialization when there were so many gains to be secured from disarticulated industrialization, subcontracting, and other modes of turning southern industrialization into labor arbitrage? There are two instances which come immediately to mind to substantiate what we may call or describe as the Max Eil thesis. These are the G8 Africa Action Plan and the Doha Development Round of the WTO. As we have said, the very significant G8 Africa Action Plan, which strikingly provided for mutual accountability between the developed North and developing Africa, was adopted by the G8 at their summit meeting in Kananaskis, Canada in 2002. The G8 summit returned to Canada 8 years later in 2010. This latter summit confirmed that the G8 Africa Action Plan had ceased to exist. So much so that the host country, Canada, refused that a discussion of the plan, of the fate of the plan, should even appear on the agenda of the meeting. This was despite the specific request for this item, the request from the African countries which attended the meeting. Simply, the G8 killed the Africa Action Plan for the reasons stated by Max Eil. We can say the same about the Doha Development Round, which kicked off in Doha, Qatar in 2001. It finally collapsed 10 years later in 2011. In 2002, the Asian Development Bank said, and I quote, "The new trade round launched at the 4th Ministerial Conference of the WTO in November 2001 in Doha is widely referred to as a development round. It promises to place development at the heart of trade negotiations, full account of the developing countries' interests and concerns, unquote. The humanitarian organization Oxfam also said, quote, the Doha development round was meant to rebalance decades of unfair rules in agriculture and address the needs of developing countries. Instead, the negotiations have betrayed this promise, unquote. The developed North refused so to reduce its agricultural subsidies as to improve access to their markets by agricultural exports from the developing South, as well as reducing the negative impact of their cheap, subsidized agricultural products on similar products in the countries of the South. In brief, as in the case of the G8 Africa Action Plan, the developed North killed the entire Doha development round for the reasons stated by Max Eil. Everything we've said so far makes the universal statement, the unequivocal statement, that Africa is very far from achieving the socio-economic objectives set, for instance, by NEPAD. In this context, one of the things Africa must do through the AU is urgently to convene a high-level African think tank with the tasks, one, to review all the policies and programs in which the continent is engaged to achieve sustainable development, and two, to make recommendations with timeframes about the actions to be taken to achieve various objectives, such as those stated in agendas 2030 and 2063. And three, state what steps should be taken to address such obstacles as may exist or emerge to frustrate the achievement of the set objectives, and alternatively, what measures should be put in place to take advantage of such opportunities as may exist or emerge to facilitate the realization of the set objectives. Our broad theme correctly points us to the reality of changing times, within which we must discuss Africa's challenges. Last month, that is January this year, the new U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made some important remarks during an interview. He said, and I quote, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we were the only power in the world. And so we assumed this responsibility of sort of becoming the global government in many cases, trying to solve every problem. And so it's not normal for the world to simply have a unipolar power. That was an anomaly. It was a product of the end of the Cold War, but eventually you are going to reach back to a point where you have a multipolar world, multi-great powers in different parts of the planet. We face that now with China, and some extent Russia, and then you have rogue states like Iran, North Korea you have to deal with, unquote. Secretary Rubio is quite correct that an important element of our changing times is the struggle for a multipolar as opposed to a unipolar global order. Unfortunately, I do not have time to make a comprehensive presentation on this issue and will therefore be brief. The war in Ukraine is a manifestation of this battle between multipolarity and unipolarity. The US in particular wanted to see Russia defeated and positioned such that it would not be in a position ever to challenge US hegemony. This US project has failed in good measure because it could not achieve the global isolation of Russia which it sought. An article entitled Global Power Shift and Multipolarity says, and I quote, the global balance of power is shifting towards a multipolar and fragmented world order. This has significant implications for Africa's international relations. States such as China, Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, are increasing their political, economic, and military involvement on the continent. They offer African states new forms of cooperation and thus potentially more opportunities to shape their foreign relations, unquote. Inevitably, this will also mean intense competition. And here I will only use the example of China and the United States. According to the FOCAC Beijing Action Plan 2025 to 2027, China will provide $50.7 billion US dollars financial support to Africa during this period. In addition, among others, China will finance 1,000 projects during the same period to improve people's livelihoods. This is substantial support for Africa's development program. On the other hand, the current Trump administration has not as yet produced its Africa policy. Such policy was announced by then National Security Advisor to President Trump, the well-known Ambassador John Bolton, in 2018 during the earlier Trump administration. Among other things, Ambassador Bolton said, and I quote, "We have prioritized developing this document because we understand that lasting stability, prosperity, independence, and security on the African continent are in the national interest of the United States. Our first priority, enhancing U.S. economic ties with the region, is also vital to safeguarding the economic independence of African states and protecting U.S. national security interests. Great power competitors, namely China and Russia, are rapidly expanding their financial and political influence across Africa to gain a competitive advantage over the United States. China uses bribes, opaque agreements, and the strategic use of debt to hold states in Africa captive to Beijing's wishes and demands. Russia, for its part, is also seeking to increase its influence in the continent through corrupt economic dealings. In short, said Bolton, the predatory practices pursued by China and Russia stunt economic growth in Africa, threaten the financial independence of African nations, inhibit opportunities for U.S. investment, interfere with U.S. military operations, and pose a significant threat to U.S. national security interests, unquote. This example about what China said about Africa in 2024 and what the U.S. said about Africa in 2018 graphically indicates the challenges Africa will face in terms of competing international players in the context of the establishment of a global multipolar order. Our continent, especially the AU, has to prepare properly to position Africa correctly within the emerging multipolar world, which, for instance, has seen the emergence of the important BRICS group of countries and the insertion into the global agenda of such matters as the global de-dollarization of international economic relations. What this means is that our continent must pay particular attention to the urgent strategic task to develop a leadership cadre capable of defending and advancing Africa's interests within the context of competing global players in a situation of both continuing globalization and the institution of a multipolar world order. This requires an African cadre of leadership, which both understands and is truly committed to the Pan-Africanist perspective. This also means an African cadre of leadership that is genuinely committed to serve the people of Africa, firmly opposed to corruption and other self-serving behavior by people in leading positions. It means an African cadre of leadership which is well-schooled in the operational, tactical, and strategic objectives our continent pursues at any particular time. It demands that the fellow Africans charged with the full-time task to defend and advance Africa's interests, the permanent representatives at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, as well as the AU Commission, must be people of high caliber, consistent with the quality of the cadre of leadership we've tried to convey. The immensity of the task we face in this regard is confirmed by the succession of negatives, which have meant that the AU has gone missing as the conflict in Libya remains unresolved. As war raged in Ethiopia from November 2020, the same concerning the AU has happened as war has raged in Sudan starting from April 2023, as the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States has threatened the very survival of ECOWAS, and as many African countries have once more fallen into a debt trap, and so on. I'm very glad that today we are launching the Amandla Institute for Leadership and Policy Advancement, which must and will play an important role in helping our continent to accomplish the tasks we have indicated. Please accept my best wishes for the success of the launch of the Amandla Institute. And thank you very much.
The round of applause might not get to South Africa. Can we make it sound so that he can hear us in South Africa? Thank you very much. Thank you. We will adjust our program a little bit because of the exigency of our special guests. But let me welcome here the Chief Servant, His Excellency Mwanzu Babangida Aliyu, former governor of Niger State, who is here with us. His Excellency Abdul Fattah Ahmed, former governor of Kwara State, is also here with us. His Excellency Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, former governor of Sokoto State, is here with us. And His Excellency Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, former Deputy Speaker and former governor of Imo State, also here with us. I welcome you. Thank you very much. And so, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at different fora that I've seen this man speak, he believes that the forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influences that keep us apart. He is a man that does what he loves and loves what he does. Every day that he wakes up, he expects to be judged by what he does. To him, we are judged not by the harvest we make, but by the seed we plant. He autographs his work with excellence, and we are very happy that today he's representing the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Please join me as I welcome here His Excellency the Vice President of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON.
The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, my sister Amina Mohammed, GCON, I'd like to use you as my point of reference to recognize, appreciate, and celebrate all the women of Africa and the women of the world. Former Head of State, the Venerable General Yakubu Gowon. Former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, GCON. During the political cycles, I was the agent provocateur, and I took pot shots at him. but being an elder statesman, he took it calmly. In private conversations, I address him as Baba. But come 2027, I will still take the first shot at him. Former elder statesman and former national chairman of the APC, Baba Bisi Akande and John Odige Oyogun, former president of the Senate, my friend Bukola Saraki, GCON, the host governor, right, Abiodun Abayomi Oyebanji, Badge. Badge. Governor of Ondo State, Mr. Loki Aidetiwa, Senate Majority Leader, Senator Michael Fayemi Bamidele, and I would like to use you as my point of reference to recognize and appreciate current and former members of the National Assembly. Former chairman of the NGF, Senator Abdul Aziz Yari Abubakar, I would like to use you to appreciate and celebrate all our former colleagues in the Governors Club. I have seen Right Honorable Aminu Waziri Tambwal, Richard Adeni Adebayo Otumba and his beautiful wife Erelu, former Governor Obekitise Shegun Oni, and my colleagues in the Federal Executive Council, Muhammad Baduru Abubakar and Abubakar Atiku Bagudu. There are so many VIPs here. I would rather say I respect all of you. I cherish all of you. Gabriel Suswam, a senator. My friend, the Otumba of Benue, is also seated here. And of course, the celebrant and his beautiful wife. And I want to specially recognize our father, Cardinal John. And my sister referred to him as Archbishop. She's a Catholic, but she referred to our cardinal as Archbishop. Your Royal Father, Oba Oni Ade Enitan Ogunwusi Ojaja II. Your Royal Highness, the Emir of Kano, Muhammad Sanusi II. King Jaja of Opobo, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the diplomatic corps. The world has never suffered from a scarcity of ideas. Nations and civilizations have risen on the strength of visionaries, and they have also crumbled under the weight of ideas left in the dusty boat of time. But today, the world as we know it is born to a reality in which we cannot afford to be preloading bystanders. This gathering is an acknowledgement of this dilemma, and I am honored to join my brother and friend, a scholar statesman of the finest breed, John Kayode Fayemi. Mission to be an intellectual prototype for the continent. The post-idea world is not a world without ideas. It is a world where the excuse of not knowing has expired. Imagine technologies like the large language models of artificial intelligence and machine learning have shattered traditional barriers to knowledge. The answers to our most complex problems are no longer elusive. They exist at our fingertips, generated in mere seconds. The real question is no longer what we should do. That has been answered a billion times over. The real question is who will act. Who will rise above inertia and ensure that our ideas do not remain ink on paper, buried in symposiums and policy documents. For centuries, Africa was plundered for its resources. For these centuries, we are mostly prophets of lamentation and despair. Today, we face an even worse risk. The risk of being plundered for our potential. This is so because the algorithm shaping global power, the AI rewriting economies, the policies dictating climate futures are being coded in distant capitals while we linger in debates over yesteryears. The post-idea wall forgives no such hesitation. It rewards only those quick to translate their ideas into actions or compete with the best ideologues and scientists from other parts of the world. Dr. Kayode Fayemi and Mrs. B.C. Adele Fayemi understood this, and that is why we are here. Our Mandela Institute for Policy and Leadership Advancement will have been just another think tank for empty theories and fancy talk shows if it were not the brainchilds of men that have had the privilege of fusing intellectual rigor with actionable courage. Dr. Fayemi's legacy, from pro-democracy activism to public administration, teaches us that leadership in this era demands more than ideation. It requires the stamina to execute, the grit to dismantle barriers, and the wisdom to see the inventions of the current wave of the Industrial Revolution not as a threat, but as a tool to reclaim Africa's agency. It was unsurprising that when the world converged on Davos, Switzerland last month for the 55th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, the focus was on how we could collaborate for the intelligent age. Their 2025 Global Risk Report is a call to each policymaker to pay attention to the gathering storm about to disrupt the fragility of the world, particularly our security, climate, and economic stability. It was not alarmism to point out that Africa has the gloomiest profile. This is because while terrorism and insurgency destabilize fragile states, global geopolitical tensions are diverting international attention and resources away from our security needs. The reflection of Africa in the mirror is not one of hopelessness. There are 1,000,001 ideas for every problem we see. We know what to do as climate change threatens our continent, and when extreme weather events like droughts and floods disrupt agriculture and livelihoods. We know the policy choices to prioritize to mitigate our economic instability, driven by inflation and debt crisis. And we also know how the historical greed and grievances that have brought us to where we are. We also know the devastation of the rise of misinformation and cyber threats, and what will happen if we don't build public trust and the institutions to combat our hysteria about the digital age into fuel for innovative thinking. Whatever differences across the continent, one fact that can be eroded by our infighting is that we are in the age of machines, and we can't fight our development dilemma with spears and arrows while the rest of the world is fighting the same battle with missiles and tanks. The world is not waiting for Africa to catch up. While we parse political rivalries, others parse data sets. While we litigate history, others engineer futures. The trend of progress accelerates, yet too many of our leaders cling to old carriages. These are our client state mentalities, our dependency on foreign blueprints, and our governance by hashtag activism. This is indeed the tragedy of our time. The founding of Mandela Institute emerges as an antidote to this paralysis. We are here not only to generate more ideas, but to create executors. We need leaders who will policy as a scalpel, not a slogan. We need visionaries who see AI as a collaborator, not a competitor. We need a generation of Africans who recognize that Pan-Africanism, renewed for this age, must be rooted in actionable sovereignty. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the renaissance of this country will not be gifted. It must be built. For too long, we have outsourced our thinking. For too long, we have relied on institutions and ideologies that treat us as consumers, not creators. But the post-idea world deserves excuses. With the democratization of knowledge, we must empower our youth to innovate in tech hubs across the continent, from Cairo down through Nairobi to Lagos, building unicorns without the permission of any gatekeepers. What they lack is not ideas, but ecosystems, systems where policy, funding, and the political will converge to scale their journeys. This is why, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is why leadership matters. Leaders must evolve from custodians of power to architects of platforms. Our imagination of Africa must be one where every government ministry houses AI strategies, where continental trade policies are drafted by homegrown think tanks like the Mandela Institute, not foreign consultants, and where Made in Africa signifies not raw materials, but algorithms, green tech, and cultural capital. We are not here to be spectators in the post-idea world. The pace of change will not pause for Africa's historical grievances or applaud our elegies for lost time. Regret, as the opening stanza warns, writes history in the ink of what if. The Mandela Institute must be a furnace where regret is molted into resolve. It must be a place that trains leaders to ask, what will I break, build, or build my legacy on today? And I have no doubt that the founders are prepared for this revolution. My candid advice for the African youth is that you are the first generation with tools to leave pro-colonial legacies. For those of us privileged to lead you through this interesting time, we must never forget that our legacy can only be sustained by the systems we institutionalize. Africa seeks collaboration, not patronage. This is the vision to convey to the world. We are not a testing ground for experiments, but equals in co-creating solutions. As we ponder the Fayemis, let us channel their restlessness. Let this symposium be remembered not for its eloquence, but for its ignition. It's time for Africa to stop debating ideas and start deploying them. The Mandela Institute must become a command center for the continent, turning thinkers into doers, policies into progress, and Pan-African ideals into lived realities. The post-idea world belongs to Africa. It belongs to those who act. Africa must not see prosperity as a gift. It is a prize to be won. And to win, we must embrace the responsibility of leadership. Not just in politics, but in policy, in business, in technology, in governance, and in shaping the narratives that define our place in the world. By 2050, Nigeria will be the third most populous nation on earth. We will surpass the United States. And the trajectory of global growth is facing Africa. And Nigeria must make or mar that destination. Of the dozen unicorns in Africa, 8 are in Nigeria. The latest one, Money Point, became a unicorn less than 2 months ago. I urge you I beseech this esteemed crowd, made up of intellectuals, made up of brainy people, irrespective of differences in political affiliations, religious persuasions, sectional or tribal backgrounds. What binds us together supersedes whatever that divides us. We have to make Africa work, and Nigeria has to work before Africa can work. Once again, I beseech thee, I implore on our leaders seated here, I'm begging you in the name of God, let's unite for the common good of our people. Thank you, and God bless us all.
His Excellency, the representative of the President has spoken. He's making his way down to take the photographs for this opportunity at this time. We thank you, sir. And I will now invite all those who will be joining him. Please be seated. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. His Excellency has spoken about the risk of being plundered by our potential. The Institute must make sure that thinkers become doers. His Excellency, representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Kashim Shettima. Another round of applause for him. The first batch is, as he makes his way for meet and greet, I'd like to quickly announce that the first batch for the photograph will be everybody in the front row. Everybody in the front row will make their way for the first batch of the photograph. And I'd like to say here that my sincere public apologies to John Cardinal Onaikon. I'm a Catholic. I don't want to be excommunicated. I have no business calling him an archbishop. So I shall also go to confession, and the correction coming from His Excellency the Vice President makes it so powerful. We would now invite Mr. Vice President to take his place, and the photographs will now take place of everybody in the front row first. That's the first batch. Everybody in the front row. Everybody in the front row. And the second batch should please prepare all 7 governors, all 7 ministers in the second batch, including Can media please put up the screen? It's reflecting. Our first batch is everybody in the front row for now. And our second batch will be all 7 governors and all 7 ministers. I would also like to invite John Pierre Elong Mbasi, if he is not already in this first batch, to quickly join in the second batch, if he's here. He's going to be in the second batch. Mr. John Pierre Elong Mbasi, could you come forward, please? Thank you, sir. Keep coming. Yes, 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 yes. He is the Secretary General, United Cities of Social Government for Africa. This is the first batch. Second batch, please prepare all 7 governors, all 7 ministers. Would the first batch please fall away so that the second batch will join? Of course, Mr. Vice President and the chief host will remain in this photograph along with the celebrant. All 7 governors, all 7 ministers to please join, and representatives of governors, wherever you are, please come forward real quick and join this photograph. I'd like to invite for this second batch all faith leaders, John Cardinal Onaikon, Pastor Tunde Bakare, former speakers, former deputy speakers who are here present, to please join this photograph. Thank you very much. After this batch, we have all former leaders of the National Assembly, of course, party leaders, all former governors, all former ministers. All former governors, all former ministers to join the next batch like real quick. Former leadership of the National Assembly, all former governors, all former ministers. All former governors, all former ministers are the next batch, like right now. Everybody else should please fall away. I see my brother, former Attorney General Mohammed Bello Adoke, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Onyema, former Governor of Anambra State, former Senator, former Minister, Ngige. This is the photograph for all former governors. Your Excellency, Amina Mohammed would remain in this photograph, please. Your Excellency, please make your way to the middle. Your Excellency, Amina Mohammed, to the middle, please. All former governors, all former ministers, United Nations Deputy Secretary General, please make way for her to join. Thank you. Chief John, sir, we're waiting for you to fall in this picture. Thank you. This is the photograph for all former ministers, all leaders of the National Assembly, all former governors here present. Chief John, sir, you are delaying our picture. Thank you, sir. The photograph will be taken, and then we have the next batch. If you will all fall away, please. Please fall away. The next batch. All traditional rulers, our esteemed traditional rulers, will now please join. The Oni of Ife, Sarkin Kanu, all traditional rulers from Ekiti State. Kade ko pẹ́ lórí, kí bàtà kó pẹ́ lẹ́sẹ̀, ẹ ṣé o, ẹ kú dìde wá. All traditional rulers, please make way for the traditional rulers. We're coming to the end of the photograph. Mr. Vice President has been patient. All traditional rulers to please join this photograph like right now. Thank you very much. Ẹ ṣé sir. Oh yeah, sorry sir. Imi nnu yín kẹ́ máa lọ sí the other side. Yes sir. Please clear the way for this photograph to be taken real quick. This is the time for traditional rulers, our esteemed traditional rulers. Please can all those in the aisle and on the front row be seated? The cameras are having difficulty taking this picture. Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, please be seated, sir. Thank you very much. We can't see. We need our traditional rulers in this important photograph. It's a testimony to Dr. Fayemi and his wife that they are all here to support. This is an important photograph. And finally, only family members, only Mandla first. The board of Amandla, and I'd like to crave the indulgence of Her Excellency Amina Mohammed to join the board of Amandlas here for this photograph, after which we have family and it's over. His Excellency the Vice President has matters of state requesting his presence right now. The Amandla board, and then family. The aisle. In another 5 minutes, His Excellency will depart this room. We don't want the aisle clogged. Amandla board. The board of the Amandla Institute. The board of the Amandla Institute. If we will take our seats, we'll keep this place in order for the sake of His Excellency, who is still in our midst, please. Thank you very much. This is the Amandla board, right? And once the Amandla board is done, okay, thank you, Your Excellency Amina Mohammed. We appreciate you. Board members, please step aside for a minute. Let's finish with the family. And then you come back into the picture. Please just stand aside. It's done. Just stand aside. Just the family will be in this picture. Where is Folajimi? You cannot, your parents are calling you, not me. Folajimi, where are you seated? Please. And here, Adesho, where are you? Adeshoko. Folajimi, please make way. Let Folajimi make his way to the front seat. Folajimi, keep coming. Thank you. This is the family photograph. Family photograph. Quickly, 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 the family photograph. And once this is done, Amandla Institute Board will take their place and it's over. I'm being heckled to let His Excellency leave the room at this time. Thank you. Family, please fall away. Time to fall away. Time for the Amandla Institute, and that's the last photograph. Your Excellency, we crave your indulgence. Thank you. Thank you for your kindness. Your Excellency, we can't let you stay at the fringe. You have to go to the middle. Sorry. This is the last photograph for the photography session with His Excellency the Vice President. Please remain in this picture. There will be other photographs later on, but at the moment, this is the last photograph with His Excellency Mr. Vice President. And it is now all done. Your Excellency, we thank you for your patience. Please let us remain on our feet as His Excellency the Vice President departs the room. Shall we remain on our feet? Can we please clear the aisle? The Vice President is leaving the room. Let's remain on our seat. Let's give him another round of applause. The Vice President has graciously given us permission to play the anthem at the end of this event. The event has not ended. So please, you may now sit. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Thank you. We're quickly going to the panel. And no, we're going to the cultural troupe. But before then, I want to put on record that we have the former governor of Niger State here, former governor of Kaduna State, Dr. Mukhtar Ramalan Yero, Professor Tunji Olaopa. We have him here. The representative of the Ebonyi State governor is here with us. He has made his way. Senator Onyekachi Nwabonyi, Deputy Chief Whip of the Nigerian Senate, members of the Diplomatic Corps. We also have members that have joined us. H.E. Right Honorable Bello, former Speaker, former Governor, Katsina State. We have with us here also my in-law, Honorable Benga Oyebode, Esquire, was in this room a while ago. And of course, we have all the other exclusive members. It's time now for you to come and talk to us about the dance. Please give a round of applause to Ebere Young. Before then, we have Right Honorable Amina Bello. Oh, we have Right Honorable Aminu Bello Masari, former Speaker, House of Representatives, and Senator Binani in the room. Ebere?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very quickly, without much ado, we will invite the cultural troupe. They are the Ekiti State Performing Arts Company, offering a performance titled Iwure. Iwure is a prayer in traditional Ekiti society, it is a prayer for the celebrant at 60 and a summation of people's goodwill for this amazing man. So without much ado, let me welcome here the Ekiti State Performing Arts Company.
Please,
the event is still on. Let's take our seats. The event is still on, please. The event is still on. Can we take our seats? Let's settle down, please. Let's settle down. Let's settle down, please. Thank you very much. Let's settle down. Take our seats. Let's take our seats, please. Let's take our seats, please. Let's settle down, please. Let's settle down. Let's settle down. Let's settle down. Thank you very much. Now take it away. Where's the one you are using before?
Ijare elese mutele weseure 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 ahoko weseure aba mutele weseure ayedati wa mutele weseure elese mutele weseure Fayemi wo ku orire weseure okorelu ma wole maraba elese mutele o elese mutele o Senator Fayemi Bamidele Obama wole maraba Senator Yemi Adara Modumi elese mutele o Honorable Biodun Omoleye elese mutele o Ami Adeoye Aribasoyemi àti kete ọmọlẹ́gbẹ̀ẹ́ máa jọ fi Èkìtì ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mú tẹ́lẹ̀ o ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mú tẹ́lẹ̀ o ọmọ Edo State ní Nàìjíríà bàbá mi kò wọnú mi Yakubu ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mú tẹ́lẹ̀ o Alájà Atiku Abubakar mẹ́ra ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mú tẹ́lẹ̀ o ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mú tẹ́lẹ̀ o kábíyèsí ọjà ajá kejì ọ̀fọ̀dún kábíyèsí ọba tẹ̀mí ọ̀ní ìfẹ́ máa wo la maraba ọ̀sùnmọ̀ balẹ̀wẹ̀ kan ọ̀jẹ̀nà sọ́ balẹ̀wẹ̀ méjì àkábíyèsí ọmọ mútẹ́lẹ̀ o kẹtẹ lọ́ba lọ́ba lẹ́kìtì mo kí àhádé apẹ́ lórí ọba o ẹ̀mí àkànú omi Alájì Sanusi ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mútẹ́lẹ̀ o ọ̀túnba ní yàrá báyọ̀ hẹ́ ẹ̀jẹ̀ ni aṣẹ́gun òní ẹlẹ́sẹ̀ mútẹ́lẹ̀ o ọ̀tọ́ ìbàbà bọ̀ ìbàbà tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ àwọn tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ àbàbà tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ àbàbà tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ ọlọ́mí tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ àbàbà bọ̀ o ìbàbà bọ̀ ìmọ̀ṣẹ́ bàbà bọ̀ o ìbàbà bọ̀ àbàbà tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ bàbá tó kó do ìbà ìbàbà bọ̀ ẹ̀yà wúre kò há ìbàbà bọ̀ àkáyẹkẹ́ ètòrò ìbàbà bọ̀ àkóògbà kẹrọ alọ́rùn gbẹdẹgbẹdẹ lérò ọdẹ ògbọ́lẹ̀ rí ibi títù ọjà náà ti torí àbàbà tó kó do ìbà àbàbà tó kó do ìbà àbàbà tó kó do olùdíjìjì ure ayami yóò gure o ure ọmọ yóò gure o ọmọ yóò gure o ure mélòó ure ọmọ yóò gure o ure ọmọ yóò gure o ure ọmọ yóò gure o ure ayọ̀dẹ̀ báyọ̀ mìíràn mi o ure wà mọ́ gbọ́wọ́ rí ure àwọn ọ̀dà mẹ́rin kìdè jóbi ure ekú má jọba àdùn àmì ure àwọn Èkìtì àgbẹ̀ á ure owó kẹ́kẹ́ náà mẹ́ báyìí ro ure ayọ̀ mẹ́ dàgbà kẹ́mọ́ ti pàgẹ́ ure owó náà yẹ máa jẹ fọ́ ure owó náà yẹ máa jẹ fọ́ bọ́ọ̀lù rẹ̀ pé ure àwọn àdùn ọlọ́ra ure àdàbẹ́ alẹ́
kókó ibà kúrọ̀.
Ure.
Wọ́n ṣubú ọ̀rọ̀ wọ́n ṣubú ẹ̀mí.
Ure.
Àwọn kò bá rìn láṣẹ o.
Ure.
Àwọn amógún wà mẹ́sẹ̀kún.
Ure.
Àwọn kò bá dé ifò lókè.
Ure.
Ṣé lọ yún ire kọ̀ àbọ̀ ire?
Ure.
Àwọn aṣoko yá jẹ́ ń ṣọ́.
Ure.
Àrèdókò yá jẹ́ ń dán lọ́rọ̀ rẹ̀.
Ure.
Òrìṣòkò yá jẹ́ ń sunlẹ̀ dòjòjò.
Ure.
Kọrin lálẹ́ wá jábọ́.
Ure.
Kó fò lókè wá máa jábọ́.
Ure.
Gbẹ̀dẹ̀gbẹ̀ lẹ́tà kókó ibà kúrọ̀.
Ure.
Ọmọ yá bùrẹ́ o.
Ure.
Orí mi yá bùrẹ́.
Ure. Àyà mi yá bùrẹ́ o. Ure.
Ẹ̀yin olú àfimọ́ra tó àfimí lára.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Àfimí lára.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Àfimí lára.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra
Kúlẹ̀
tó.
ti yá ìmọ̀ jálò.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Olùlé ìrẹ̀lẹ̀.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Kúlẹ̀ ti yá ìjálò.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Àròjọ Musolókun.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra
Àròjọ
tó.
Musolókun ọjọ́ ìlọ.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara tó.
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 Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra
Kúlẹ̀
tó.
ti yá ìjà lọ.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Afimilara.
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 Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò afimara tó.
Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó. Ẹ̀yin orò àfimọ́ra tó.
Thank you, thank you, thank
Ẹ̀yin orò
you.
àfimọ́ra tó.
Thank you. Let's settle down, please. It's time to have a panel discussion. Let's settle down, please. Let's have one room. Thank you. We appreciate all of you. We say thank you to all of you, our royal fathers, present governors and past governors. Let's settle down, please. Let's settle down, please. Thank you. Let's settle down. Thank you. Without much ado, welcome here the moderator of our panel discussion, Vice President and Vice Principal International and Professor of Security, Leadership and Development at King's College London. Please welcome here Professor Fumi Olonishakin. Professor Fumi Olonishakin.
Excellencies, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, I'm having to raise my voice as much as possible because I'm trying to call your attention. Can we all be seated, please? Can we all be seated, please? I hope you will take this session as seriously as you took the previous sessions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please be seated. Excellencies, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. May I begin by calling to the stage the panelists for this session. We have 4 panelists for this session. And before I introduce them individually, I would like to call up Professor
Abdullahi Batili. Prof. Batili, please come to the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. I promised all those who were coming to Nigeria for the first time that Nigerians will host them like no other place. Can you please help me make sure of that? Thank you, thank you, thank you. But Prof. Batili is not a first-time comer to Nigeria, by the way. May I call Professor Diplomat now, Professor Ambassador Abinabusia. Where is she? Please come to the stage. May I call Professor Richard Joseph? Where is Prof. Richard Joseph? Thank you. Thank you. May I call Brian Kagoro? Brian Kagoro? Thank you so much. Can I promise to run this session in slightly less time than we scheduled? If you promise to give me your attention, is that okay? Yes? Can I hear the yes properly? Thank you. I have brought so many guests from abroad, and I want us to really interact after this. Let me promise you 45 minutes, right? So very quickly, I don't know where my tribute went to, but I want to be able to introduce our panelists in a way that you'll understand why they're on the stage. We have what we call renewing the Pan-African ideal in changing times, the leadership and policy challenges and opportunities. And this session, we begin to take those issues to heart by listening to eminent Pan-Africanists par excellence, who have done so much for this continent to live that ideal. But before I do that, can I please make a few opening remarks? Literally, opening remarks in that sense, because the person we're here to celebrate, who some of us call Prof. Gov, Professor Governor, we do that, and we gave him that nickname because, and that predates the fact that he's a visiting professor at King's College, London. But the term reflects the combination of his intellectual robustness and leadership competencies as observed by those who have worked with him over time in academia, in policy, and in political governance settings. And it's not just about that, it's also about his character and his define him. You have heard so much about it. But I can tell you that when it comes to leadership in terms of building institutions, creating institutions and building them, translational activism. By that meaning that he combines ideation and translation of those ideas into executable action. This is what he has shown through his scholarship and his policy work. And now we cannot even begin to talk about his friendship and loyalty. As I introduce the panelists, Professor Abdullahi Batili, who some of us know. We've come to know him as a scholar, policy, not just policy activist, but policy teacher as well. For those of you who know his work, you will know that some of his foremost work around the military and militarism in Africa is of household reading to those who work with issues of security institutions. I want to next introduce, because of the questions we'll be discussing this afternoon, Professor Ambassador, I don't even know how to refer to you anymore, a scholar who was a professor at the University of Rutgers and then became Ghana's ambassador to Brazil. She will be sharing some reflections, and that's Professor Ambassador Abinabusia. Please welcome them. So can I say something about Professor Richard Joseph? If we're talking about Pan-Africanism in the room, I think you already know. Those of you who are political science scholars, those in this room, including some of the eminent persons that had spoken earlier, would know Richard Joseph for his work on prebendalism. Can I get your attention? Any political science scholars in the room? Thank you. And that has become a foremost agenda item, if you like, on the mouths and the actions of scholars. I want to read a text that defines him in particular ways. Then you begin to know what prebendalism refers to, and if you listen to the keynote speech that we heard earlier on, you begin to understand what I am talking about. Prebendal politics and governance. Prebendalism in Africa, some would say it provides and provokes stimulating analysis of Nigerian federalism, but it's not just about Nigerian federalism, all right? But when you hear this meaning, it refers to political systems in which elected officials and government workers feel that they have a right to a share of government revenues and use them to benefit supporters, co-religionists, and members of the ethnic groups. This is what President Mbeki was referring to in his keynote, that's a shift that needs to happen if Africa is to have the kind of share of its position in the global order. But last but not least, those who have not seen this fellow, Brian Kagoro, either via TikTok, WhatsApp, circulating across the African continent, we know that his day job is probably the thing that he does out of some kind of fun, right? What you see as his day job. He's a committed Pan-Africanist. He's the managing director of programs at the Open Society Foundations. But that's not the thing that defines him. What defines him is his belief in a Pan-Africanist agenda and the ways in which he has articulated it and has taken it forward over the past few years. So, without further ado, I will take my seat, and I only want to offer two sets of questions. The first speaks to today, and those questions have to do with what challenges us most when we think about Pan-Africanism today. What needs to change in order for us to move forward? And each person will reflect on that from their own personal perspective. And I will go in the order in which I've introduced them. The second set of questions, which is all we have time for, looks to the future. Where do we need to go? And how do we get there? If we want to be not left behind, but an Africa that is part of the emerging multipolar world. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I want to begin. Is this on? Can you hear me? I would like to begin to ask these questions. And Prof. Batili, I want to start with you. Pan-Africanism reflects the realities of the African continent, but not just the African continent collectively. The beauty of Pan-Africanism is that it deals with all our constituencies in the world, right? So much so that the African Union has a sixth region. It's diaspora that reflects so many aspects of Pan-Africanism. In your view, and with the work that you've been doing of late, Prof, what is it that has gone wrong with that Pan-Africanist vision that President Mbeki was talking about in the way that we organized our institutions? He referred to NEPAD. We saw the transition from the OAU to the AU. What is it that is challenging for us now, and what needs to change from your perspective?
Thank you very much, Umi. I can't refrain from, like many other speakers before, to congratulate Kayode Fayemi, my young brother with whom I had crisscrossed in Africa. Even last week we were together in Dakar. For many years, last 3 decades, we have been discussing, exchanging views, and acting on the issues of Pan-Africanism and regional integration. He's a man of conviction, of dedication to the ideals of Pan-Africanism. And the establishment of this institution is a testimony to his long-time commitment to the cause of Africa and its people. So, happy birthday to you, comrades in arms, and BC also. I would like to say a few things from my personal perspective. I am of a generation who has witnessed the rise of all the current flags of Africa. I was a schoolboy, secondary school, in 1960, when all these flags were raised. Independence. We all remember the famous statement by Harold Macmillan about the wind of change in Africa. Some would say 1960 was the year of Africa. And we were in high expectations, high hope. In the previous decade before, we as school children, we fought against colonialism with our elders so that Africa will be independent politically, independent economically, independent in our culture. President Mbeki has said in his statement, the cause of the current situation in Africa is not a lack of vision. The vision has been clearly stated out. There is nothing to say about it. When you look at the AU Charter, you look at all the documents, the NEPAD, all these declarations, they are perfect. What remains to be done is how to implement them. The issue is about implementation. And I said in many of my statements that today Africa is faced with one major challenge. What is this major challenge for Africa? Like at the close of the 19th century, when the Berlin Conference took place, from November 1884 to February 1885, when Africa was divided among the European powers, the scramble was going on. The current map of Africa, this situation of division. When we look at the situation very much today, not much has changed, because what has been put forward as a vision for a united Africa, a prosperous Africa, those expectations have been not met. And today we are faced with a new scramble for Africa, like the one at the close of the 19th century. Africa today is looked for a continent rich of minerals, rich of manpower to be used. Africa is faced today with a situation whereby there is a lack of common vision in terms of getting together, the countries getting together at AU level, a common political will to implement what has been decided, what is being decided by AU at different stages. NEPAD has collapsed as a project. What we see today in Africa is really, for us as a generation, a sad situation. Africa is involved in different partnerships with different countries, with different powers, big, middle powers, even small powers. When there is a meeting, a summit between Africa and any of these partners, what we see is a lack of preparation, a lack of common standing, a lack of common strategy, a lack of common tactics among African states before they go to those summits. And moreover, we can see that at all those summits, there are more heads of states who attend than they attend the AU summit. This we can see. When China calls, when America calls, when France calls, when Turkey calls, everybody go to those summits. Hardly you have a quorum at the AU meeting. This is our problem today. So there is a question of leadership, the lack of leadership in Africa today. I think this is our own main crisis. We are victims of the new scramble for Africa on the one hand, but at the same time, we have no leadership who is able to catalyze the will,
thank you,
the political will of the African people.
Prof,
so
thank
for
you.
me, these
thank
are
you.
the issues.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the audience, I'll be offering reflections because there won't be time for questions. We would not have questions from the floor, but I hope that we can have a conversation that represents some of the questions that we have in our minds. As Prof. Batili was speaking, you can think of a continental vision. We're not short of that. You can think of what created NEPAD, and in your comment, NEPAD has collapsed as a project. Perhaps one of the reasons as well is that there's a way in which we think about African states and individual leaders, so that when the 5 or 6 leaders that came together to develop a continental agenda like that, left their positions of authority in their countries, nothing else remained. Can I leave us with the thinking that even in Nigeria, as the Vice President of Nigeria was talking and saying that Africa can't work unless Nigeria works. You can say that of Africa can't work unless South Africa works or Senegal works, but we are successful individually as Africans. We're not collectively successful. Every individual wants to succeed alone, but we do not think about what that means cumulatively in terms of how Africa is seen in the world. If you want to challenge this, do so and do so powerfully. How can we be collectively successful? But Professor Ambassador Abinabusea, I love this question I'm about to ask you as you reflect on the challenges of today from your own personal experience, because Pan-Africanism is often seen as the whole of Africa as the African states. And in your reflections, how does actually Africa travel? How do African peoples think about the collective? What did you see when you were ambassador of Ghana to Brazil? Please give us just a few moments of your reflection on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that question. So I have a lot to say. I was furiously taking notes through all the speeches, including yours. So I'm going to try and confine myself to the particular observations I had as ambassador. I have to say I had the privilege of being Ghana's ambassador, and although I was located in Brazil, in Brasilia, Ghana's mission to Brazil is concurrently accredited to all 12 nations of continental South America. So I was ambassador to the whole of South America. I had the privilege of becoming actually the first ambassador to present my credentials to all 12. So I visited all 12 countries at least once. And my specific answer to your question is based on my observations of the response to the excitement generated by the potential, because unfortunately it didn't take place, the potential of the 6th Pan-African Congress, which was supposed to take place in Lomé last October, but didn't. But of course, nobody knew it wasn't going to take place, and so everybody tried to prepare for it. And in a sense, my remarks can be clustered around a challenge, if you like, between the notion of Africa must unite and Africans must unite. So before I go to talk about what was going on the continent, I just want to state something that has been touched on. It's an obvious thing, but it's crucially important. Crucially important because this 9th Pan-African Congress was specifically organized and called for by the African Union, and not like the other ones by civil society organizations. And that is, the AU itself, as a structure, like the United Nations, is organized around nation states. So the 5 other regions are nation-state regions. If you look at the map, it will tell you which countries belong to which regions, and that's how they structure themselves. By contrast, oh, sorry, it's not working. Sorry. Hello. By contrast, the 6th region is the diaspora. That, by definition, means there is no nation-state structure to support its convenings. And so what I witnessed was the attempt of a mixture of civil society organizations and state-supported organizations through ministries of foreign affairs or culture or what have you, trying to get together and organize and see how they could become coherent. So the first thing that I have to point out the significance of is that they tried, which takes me back to my first point. I think that here on the African continent, we grossly underestimate the importance of what being African means to Africans outside the continent, particularly in South America. It matters. Those South Americans who identify as of African descent, it is a real affective movement or motion. The knowledge base is varied. Some people have, can sit down and talk to you about the history of Pan-Africanism. Some, all they can tell you was my grandmother was a slave and everything in between. But it matters to them. Secondly, again, the legacy of Africa is under-recognized culturally in the sense that a lot of us talk about the music. I think if people recognize the impact of anything cultural outside the continent, it's the music. We'll talk to you endlessly about the African roots of jazz and so on. But it exists in the legacy of, you can't go to Bahia and eat the food and not think you're in West Africa. Every Nigerian woman would go to Bahia and know how to cook. It exists in the aesthetic legacy of the use of colors, asymmetry in weaving and so on. I mean, I could go on and on and on, just to say, those of us who've had the privilege of living on the continent and in different parts of the diaspora can teach ourselves to recognize more clearly than people who stay in one place. It's the wood for the trees legacy, the elements.
You've been watching the Kayode Fayemi Commemorative Symposium that's been graced by numerous dignitaries, including the Vice President of Nigeria, Kashim Shettima. These activities are to commemorate the 60th birthday of the former Ekiti State Governor, Dr. Kayode Fayemi. Today is the highlight of the celebration, which commenced on Monday, February 3rd, and today's event is a commemorative colloquium at the Transcorp Hilton Hotel in Abuja. The theme of discussion is Renewing the Pan-African Ideal for the Changing Times, the Policy and Leadership Challenges and Opportunities. The event featured a keynote address by Thabo Mbeki, a South African politician who served as the second democratic president of South Africa from 14th June 1999 to 24th of September 2008.
Problem that we need to solve.
And watching Newsday, we have plenty more still ahead. Stay with us.